My ex tried to blackmail me with personal photos, but I outsmarted them at their own game. This is the kind of story you read about, and you think, that can never happen to me. You trust someone, you give them everything, and then they betray you in the worst possible way. That's what happened to me with my ex, Sarah. Everything seemed perfect until the relationship ended. But when it did, things took a dark turn. She started threatening me with personal photos, ones that were meant to be private. She said she would share them with my friends, my family, and the people I worked with if I didn't give her money. At first, I was terrified. I felt trapped, but I quickly realized that I wasn't going to let her control me. What happened next? Well, let's just say that I managed to outsmart her, and it's a story I'll never forget. It all started like most relationships do. We met through mutual friends, and things moved pretty quickly. Sarah was funny, smart, and charming. We connected on a deep level, and for a while, I genuinely thought I had found the one. We spent a lot of time together, trips, late-night talks, and endless laughter. Everything seemed perfect. But as time went on, things started to shift. Little things began to bother me, and the cracks in our relationship started to show. I noticed that Sarah would get upset over the smallest things, and there was a sense of control that I hadn't seen before. She wanted to know where I was, what I was doing, and even who I was hanging out with. It wasn't that she was outright possessive, but the constant need for reassurance made me uncomfortable. I tried to talk to her about it, but every time I did, it felt like I was walking on eggshells. I'd be accused of not understanding her, or worse, that I didn't care enough to make her feel secure. After a few months of this back and forth, I knew that I couldn't continue living like that. The fun and the joy that had once defined our relationship were gone, and all that was left were the silent battles. One day, I made the difficult decision to end things. It wasn't an easy choice, but I felt like it was the right one for both of us. Sarah was devastated, and as I walked away from the relationship, I genuinely hoped we could both move on and find happiness separately. But little did I know, that would be the beginning of a nightmare. It started innocently enough, or so I thought. A few days after we broke up, Sarah reached out to me. It wasn't unusual, we had mutual friends, and I figured we'd need to have some final conversations to sort through everything. But what I wasn't prepared for was the shift in tone in her messages. At first, she messaged me, asking if we could talk. I agreed, thinking it was just about closure. When I picked up the phone, Sarah's voice on the other end sounded different, sharp, almost cold. She started off with small talk, but soon she got to the point. "You really think you can just walk away from me like this?" she asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. I was taken aback. "Sarah, I thought we agreed this was the best decision. I really don't want to argue anymore." "That's where you're wrong," she replied. "You've left me with nothing but these memories, and I don't think you realize just how much power I have now." I was confused. "What are you talking about?" And then she dropped the bombshell. "You know, I've been thinking about those photos we took, the ones you thought were just for us. I could make those public. Imagine what people would think if they saw them." My heart sank. I didn't know what to say at first. The photos she was referring to were from when we were together. Intimate, private moments that I never thought would be used against me. I trusted her, and now she was using that trust as a weapon. "Don't do this, Sarah," I said, my voice trembling. "This isn't you. You're better than this." She laughed bitterly. "You've really messed up, haven't you? You think you can just walk away without any consequences? I don't think so." At that moment, I realized how far Sarah was willing to go to hurt me. The relationship I had thought was over was far from it. Now, it felt like I was stuck in a game I never agreed to play. The first few days after Sarah's threat were a blur. I was overwhelmed with fear, anxiety, and a sense of betrayal. I'd never thought she was capable of something like this. My mind raced. What would happen if she actually followed through? What would my friends, family, and colleagues think if those photos got out? I kept replaying the conversation in my head. Sarah was no longer the person I knew. This wasn't just about the breakup, it was about power, control, and vengeance. I didn't know what she wanted from me, but I knew she had crossed a line. The worst part was that I had no idea how far she would go. I didn't tell anyone about the threat at first. I felt embarrassed, like I should have seen it coming. It wasn't until I couldn't sleep for several nights straight that I realized I couldn't face this alone. So, I finally talked to my closest friend, Mark. I knew he'd be understanding. Mark listened carefully as I explained everything. The relationship, the breakup, and then the blackmail. His reaction was immediate. "This is serious, man. You need to get ahead of this before she actually does something. Do you have copies of the photos?" I nodded, my heart sinking even further. I had kept a folder of memories, but I never thought I'd be in a situation where I'd need to protect them. "You need to make sure you have everything backed up," Mark said firmly. "And I think you should report this. This is illegal, and you have every right to protect yourself." The thought of going to the police made me anxious. But Mark was right. I needed to take control of the situation. I wasn't about to let Sarah use my past against me, no matter how personal those photos were. But I also knew that if I went public too soon, it might backfire. Sarah could twist the narrative, and I didn't want to be the one painted as the villain. I had to think carefully about my next move. After talking to Mark, I knew what I had to do, but it wasn't going to be easy. I couldn't just sit back and wait for Sarah to make her move. I had to take control of the situation before it spiraled out of control. I needed a plan that would protect myself, expose her manipulation, and prevent her from getting the upper hand. I started by gathering everything I could: copies of the photos, messages, emails, and anything else that could serve as evidence. I also made sure I had backups of everything, stored securely online and on an external hard drive. I couldn't afford to take any chances. Then I began researching my legal options. I consulted with a lawyer who explained that what Sarah was threatening to do was a form of blackmail and was punishable under the law. I felt a little more at ease hearing that I had legal grounds to protect myself, but I also realized that it wasn't going to be as simple as just reporting her to the police. I needed to build a strong case, and that meant staying calm and not letting my emotions drive the situation. At the same time, I couldn't let Sarah think she had control over me. I decided to stop responding to her texts and calls. Every time I heard her name or saw a message from her, my anxiety spiked, but I knew I couldn't show weakness. I had to be strategic and not give her any power over me. Over the next few days, I started putting together a plan to turn the tables. I knew I had to confront her, but it couldn't be a direct fight. I had to outsmart her and expose her actions in a way that left no room for manipulation. I was done being the victim in this situation. I knew the only way to regain control was to play the game smarter than Sarah was. I had to show her that I wasn't afraid of her threats, and more importantly, that I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. I needed to expose what she was doing, but I had to do it in a way that didn't put me in a vulnerable position. I started by reaching out to some trusted friends, letting them know about Sarah's blackmail and the situation I was in. I wasn't asking for sympathy or attention. I was making sure that if the worst happened, there would be people who could vouch for me. I knew it was important to have my support system in place. I also made it clear to them that I didn't want to engage in any rumors or gossip about Sarah. I just needed their support in case I had to go public with this. Next, I called the lawyer again. I told them that I was preparing to take legal action, but I wanted to be sure I had all the right documentation and evidence before making any moves. My lawyer advised me to keep everything as calm and professional as possible. They suggested I send Sarah a final message, something that clearly stated that I was aware of what she was doing and that I would take legal action if she didn't stop. This would put her on notice without escalating things too quickly. I wasn't sure if I should send the message directly or have my lawyer handle it, but I chose to handle it myself. I had to show Sarah that I wasn't going to be intimidated. The message I wrote was simple and direct. Sarah, I'm aware of the threats you've made regarding personal photos from our relationship. Please be advised that blackmail is illegal, and I am prepared to take legal action if this continues. I strongly suggest you stop all attempts to use this situation to manipulate me. Any further communication from you will be reported to the authorities. I double-checked everything before I sent it. It wasn't an attack, but it was firm. I wasn't giving her the power she thought she had, and I was making it clear that I wouldn't tolerate this behavior. I hit send and sat back in my chair, waiting for the inevitable response. I watched the seconds tick by after I hit send. I'd done everything I could to take control of the situation, but now I had to wait for Sarah's response. Every part of me wanted to check my phone constantly, but I resisted. I couldn't let her dictate my actions anymore. The ball was in her court now. The first 24 hours were agonizing. There was no reply, no follow-up text. I wasn't sure if she was just taking her time or if she was considering her next move. Part of me thought maybe she would back down. After all, I had called her bluff. But the other part of me, the part that knew Sarah better, feared that she wouldn't go quietly. Then the message came. It was late at night, just when I was about to turn in for the day. I picked up my phone and opened the text. I didn't want to do this, Sarah wrote, but now you forced my hand. If you want those pictures to stay private, I suggest you start thinking about how much you're willing to pay to keep this quiet. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt that familiar knot of fear tighten in my chest, but this time I didn't panic. I had been preparing for this moment. It was exactly what I had expected her to say. I quickly typed a response. You're not getting a dime. I've already taken legal steps, and I will not negotiate with you. You can either stop now or face the consequences. I knew she was trying to get under my skin, to make me feel powerless again. But I had learned a valuable lesson through this whole ordeal. Never let someone manipulate your emotions. I wasn't going to let her control me, and I wasn't going to let her win. I sent the message and immediately turned my phone off. I needed some space. I couldn't keep spiraling in my thoughts. The next few days were the hardest. Sarah didn't respond to my message, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The worst part was the not knowing. Would she really take it to the next level, or was she just bluffing? I couldn't be sure, but I knew that I had to stay calm and focused. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about showing Sarah that she didn't have power over me, and I wasn't going to let her drag me into a game that wasn't mine to play. A few days after my final message, I got a call from my lawyer. I wasn't expecting anything new, but when I picked up the phone, I could tell this was serious. "Hey, I just wanted to update you," my lawyer said. "We've been able to gather some information, and it looks like Sarah may have done this before. We found evidence of similar behavior in her past. This could work in our favor, but we need to act quickly." The feeling of relief that washed over me was overwhelming. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. My lawyer had already begun compiling a stronger case against Sarah, and they had found instances where Sarah had tried to blackmail other people. Knowing that this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern, gave me the upper hand. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was building a case that would expose her manipulative behavior. I met with my lawyer the next day to discuss the next steps. Together, we crafted a legal strategy. We would wait until Sarah made another move. The moment she tried to escalate things, we would have enough evidence to go straight to the authorities. It was a risk, but it was one I was willing to take. I didn't want to engage in endless back and forth text battles with her. I wanted to end this once and for all. In the meantime, I kept living my life as normally as possible, although it was hard not to feel on edge. I had to keep an eye on everything, watching for any signs of Sarah's next move. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had one advantage. I was calm and collected. I had planned ahead. Sarah was the one panicking, trying to get me to fold. She had underestimated me, and now I had the resources and the strategy to fight back. Then, a week later, I got a call that changed everything. It was a late afternoon when I received the unexpected call. I was sitting in my living room, sipping coffee, when the phone rang. It wasn't from Sarah, thankfully. It was my lawyer again. "I think we need to move fast," they said, sounding urgent. "Sarah made her move. She sent something to one of your mutual friends." My stomach dropped. The worst thing I could imagine had finally happened. She'd taken the next step. It was exactly what I had been preparing for, but I wasn't ready for the emotional shock of it. My lawyer continued. "The friend she reached out to was someone you trusted. She's sent the photos to them, and she's trying to leverage the situation. She's threatening to make them public if you don't comply with her demands." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me, but I knew I had to keep calm. This was exactly what I had feared, but it wasn't the end. It was just the moment we'd been waiting for. I asked my lawyer to give me a moment and immediately called the friend Sarah had contacted. He was someone I had known for years, someone I trusted, and I knew Sarah had no reason to drag him into this. I didn't think he would go along with her threats, but I needed to confirm that he hadn't been manipulated into taking action. "Hey man, I've been hearing some things. Sarah reached out to you, right?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Yeah, she did," he replied, sounding uncomfortable. "She sent me some pictures. I don't know what to think. She's saying she'll release them unless you pay her some money. But I'm not okay with this." Relief washed over me. "I appreciate you telling me the truth," I said. "Sarah's blackmailing me, and she's trying to control me with those pictures. You don't have to be involved in this. I've already contacted my lawyer, and we're going to take care of it." I didn't know what to do, he admitted. I didn't want to be part of it, but I didn't want to get stuck in the middle either. "I won't do anything." I promise. I thanked him and hung up, my head racing. I could feel the pieces falling into place. Sarah had made a serious mistake. She had just handed me the ammunition I needed. Now I could confront her, and with the law on my side, I knew I had the upper hand. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the point where I could finally take control of the situation. With the confirmation that Sarah had reached out to my friend, I knew I couldn't let this slide any longer. I had enough evidence now, her threats, the blackmail, and the fact that she had tried to drag someone else into this mess. But more than that, I had the legal grounds to put an end to this once and for all. I immediately contacted my lawyer and let them know what had happened. We discussed how to proceed, and the next step was clear. It was time to turn the tables completely and expose Sarah for what she really was, a manipulator willing to go to any length to get her way. We decided that the best approach would be to gather all the evidence and present it in a formal letter. This wouldn't just be a warning, it would be an official notice that I was no longer going to tolerate her behavior. The letter would clearly outline her blackmail, the manipulation, and the consequences she would face if she continued. We also made sure to mention the legal steps I was prepared to take, including involving law enforcement if necessary. I knew Sarah would read the letter and realize she had pushed too far. She had underestimated me from the beginning, and now I was putting an end to it. The next day, I had the letter sent to her, both by email and physical mail, so she couldn't claim she hadn't received it. I wasn't expecting a response immediately, but I knew that this would force her to make a choice: continue with her threats and face the consequences, or back off before things got worse for her. I didn't hear from her right away, but my phone buzzed with a message from my lawyer about 2 days later. The message was simple: she's reached out. We've got her. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Sarah had tried to play me, to make me feel powerless, but now the tables were completely turned. It didn't take long for Sarah to reach out after receiving the official notice. The message came late one evening, and as I read it, I couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and satisfaction. "Okay, you've made your point," she wrote. "I didn't want it to go this far. I'll delete the photos, and I won't do anything else. But just so you know, I'm hurt. You broke my heart, and I thought this would make you realize how much I still care. Don't ever contact me again." I stared at the screen, reading her words over and over. There was a strange sense of closure in her message. It wasn't an apology, and it certainly wasn't genuine remorse. But it was an end. She was giving up, and I had won. Not because I played her game, but because I stood my ground. I didn't respond to her. What more was there to say? The last few weeks had been emotionally draining, but in the end, I had done the right thing. I had stood up for myself, protected my privacy, and made sure Sarah faced the consequences of her actions. A few days later, I received confirmation from my lawyer that the photos had been deleted from all her devices. No further action was needed. Sarah had been backed into a corner, and now there was nothing more she could do. It was over. The whole experience had taught me so much about myself. I learned how far I was willing to go to protect my integrity and my personal space. I learned that no matter how much someone might try to manipulate you, the key is to take control of the situation and stand firm. And most importantly, I learned that the only person who gets to define my worth and my future is me. Looking back, I realize how much I've grown through this. There were moments when I felt helpless, like the weight of Sarah's threats was too much to handle. But what I learned is that when someone tries to tear you down, it's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their own insecurities and need for control. If you've ever been in a situation where someone tried to manipulate you, use your vulnerability against you, or blackmail you, I want you to know that you are not alone. It's important to trust your instincts, gather the right support, and take action. No one has the right to make you feel powerless. Have you ever had to deal with manipulation, blackmail, or betrayal from someone close to you? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from the experience? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more.